Hello everybody and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, I will be sharing with you some of my personal thoughts on a brand new James Cameron film called Avatar: Fire and Ash. This is the third installment to a franchise that he began back in 2009. Anyone who knows me personally knows that I am a huge fan of this franchise. Exhibit A, an $86 popcorn bucket. I must be insane. The first movie absolutely blew my mind. It is a beautiful film with a very accessible storyline that touches up on universal themes of family, nature, and spirituality. And it continues to be one of my favorite films of all time. Now, I've always been one of those people that felt like Avatar really didn't need a sequel. In my opinion, that movie definitely works more as a standalone film. However, many years later, I was really impressed with The Way of Water. Not only because of its technological achievements, but also James Cameron was able to build the world of Pandora even further. Now, every time I finish an Avatar film, I always leave wanting more. Now, if you haven't seen The Way of Water, or maybe you have and just forgot all about it, I would definitely recommend you rewatching that film before you watch Fire and Ash, because what happened in that movie is very imperative to what happens in this movie. Fire and Ash picks up right where we left the Water Tribe after they just scored a major victory against the humans, who continue to want to colonize the planet of Pandora for its resources. But now Jake Sully and his family now have to contend with a new enemy, and that is the Ash people. As someone who continues to be a fan of the franchise, obviously Fire and Ash was one of my most anticipated movies of 2025. And now that I've seen the film, I have to confess that I feel a bit conflicted with this one. I did like it. However, I will say that out of all the Avatar films I've seen, this is probably the weakest one, which is a shame because naturally you would think as you progress forward, these movies will only get better. However, there are some things that this movie does better than the previous films. So before I tell you where I feel like this film fell short for me, let me tell you all the good stuff first. First of all, this film does exactly what you would expect out of an Avatar film, and that is pushing the technological advancements even further. Just when I thought that the visual effects could not get any better, James Cameron proved me wrong once again. The Oscar for visual effects is definitely in the bag with this one. I mean, the whole reason that these movies exist is to give the audience something incredible to behold, and it succeeds in that regard. There is simply nothing like it. And in terms of world building, I absolutely loved the addition of the Ash tribe in this movie. It offered a lot of differentiation and diversity to the world of Pandora. And I think it also reflects the realities of our own planet as well. Because when you think about it, there are so many cultures in this world, and not everyone is of the same belief system. In previous installments, a lot of the natives that we have seen share a common belief in Awa, the goddess that holds all of nature together. But the Ash people are something completely different. They do not believe in Awa. They might have at one point, but you understand why they went into this whole direction where they only believe in the power of fire and how it could be harnessed to give power to themselves. And as for the leader of the Ash people, Varang, played by Oona Chaplin, oh my God, this woman can act. Aside from Zoe Saldaña, who has managed to churn out great performances in every single film, Oona Chaplin delivers probably the most outstanding performance in the entire franchise. And Fire and Ash not only does a good job in adding more interesting characters to the story, but it also digs deeper into characters we're already familiar with, especially with Miles Quaritch. In the first film, Miles Quaritch was the main antagonist who ends up dying at the end. But then in The Way of Water, he is brought back in the form of an avatar, and when he and his biological son Spider clashed in The Way of Water, it made for a very interesting dynamic. And in Fire and Ash, we explore further this intensely complex relationship in a way that left me very satisfied. And Miles Quaritch is actually turning out to be one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting character in the whole franchise, because now we see him going through a very similar journey that we saw Jake Sully go through in the first movie. However, it is taking on a much more darker tone. But you could see that Quaritch is very conflicted about his situation because he has now ingratiated himself into the Na'vi tribe. He is finding himself to becoming more and more like them. However, he still remains loyal to his human superiors, who, by the way, do not see him as an equal, and he knows that. And lastly, I will say that this film touches up on family themes very well. In the previous film, Jake and Neytiri lose a son, and grief affects people in different ways. And there is one scene that absolutely broke my heart, and that is between Jake and his other son, Loak. Now, Jake and Loak never see eye to eye. That is just the nature of their relationship. However, when things got really heated between the two of them, there is a moment where Jake essentially blames Loak for his brother's death. I felt very uncomfortable watching that scene because because I do see where each character is coming from. Because Loak does unfortunately have a history of disobeying orders. If he had listened to his father, maybe Neteyam would not have lost his life. However, no child should ever have to hear that from a parent. That is just so unfair to the kid. But it's because that moment was so painful for the both of them that it felt so real. My hat's off to James Cameron on that piece of writing. There were actually a lot of seriously emotional moments in this film that I've experienced more so than The Way of Water or the first Avatar. He also utilized these characters a lot better than he did previously, especially with Spider. Something happens to this character that makes him such an asset to the plot. And not only that, he actually is proven to be a huge threat to the people of Pandora. However, the downside is I found this character to be extremely annoying. That's not to say that Jack Champion is a bad actor. He actually does a decent job in this film. I just wish he had better lines, or fewer lines would be even better. A lot of times throughout the film, he just throws out these very cheesy, corny lines of dialogue or jokes that really killed the mood for me. If I had been on the set of Avatar, I would have told Jim, look, Jim, what you have set up is cool, but just cut this line out, okay? It's really killing the scene. James Cameron to me has never been the best writer in the world, nor is he talented in writing good dialogue. And that brings me to my biggest issue with Fire and Ash, and it's the same issue I had with The Way of Water. The writing. I have seen James Cameron say in interviews that The Way of Water and Fire and Ash was originally intended to be one whole movie, but because the script ended up having so much story and so much canvas, he had to split it into 2 movies. And that, I think, is where the problem lies. I think he should have split it into 3 or 4 movies because there is so much going on in this film that it feels simply overstuffed. The first hour and a half of this movie really felt like it could have been a movie unto itself. And as for the end itself, I will have to agree with what the critics have been saying. And yes, the climactic battle at the end really did feel like a rehash of the first and second movie. The battle strategies themselves are extremely similar. I will say this, even though the writing of these movies continues to be clunky and at times cheesy, unlike some other films I could mention that came out this year, this movie actually has no plot holes. Whenever I watch these movies, I feel like everything that happens for a good reason. Everything is set up accordingly. However, because there is only so much you can fit into one movie, I feel like the emotional payoff was just not there for me. But the thing is, I still want more Avatar films. There has been a lot of speculation as to whether or not Fire and Ash is going to be the last Avatar film. And James Cameron himself has said that if Fire and Ash fails at the box office, he might stop making Avatar films, or maybe hand over the reins to somebody else. I, for one, hope that he continues to make more Avatar films because the ending of this movie just didn't make me feel satisfied. Not like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings. And that movie took forever to end, but at least it felt definite. This movie does not feel definite. So I hope Fire and Ash makes a lot of money so that he can continue to make more movies because I feel like there is a lot more to be told. Avatar is just one of those movies that takes you on a journey unlike any other film. Even though I do still think that this is the weakest of the bunch, Fire and Ash still delivers on a massive scale. In terms of story, I would give this a 7 out of 10, but in terms of execution and character development, it's a solid 10 out of 10. So combine the two together, I would give Avatar Fire and Ash a B. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Avatar Fire and Ash. Thank you so much for watching my video, ladies and gentlemen. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you again next time.